Okay, folks, strap in and prepare for some of the heaviest and most thought-provoking reading that I have yet to offer on this channel. But for those who want to write the hardest of hard SF, and maybe some other things too, this book is going to be a real prize. The book in question is called The Singular Universe and the Reality of Time, and the authors of the book are two men, one of which I am familiar with and the other new to me. The one I'm familiar with is a gentleman named Lee Smolin, and he is the author of a number of other books about the current crises in the physical sciences. For instance, The Trouble with Physics, Einstein's Unfinished Revolution, and a much earlier book called The Life of the Cosmos that serves almost as a prelude to a lot of what's discussed in this work. And much of what he talks about is how modern physics and cosmology seems to have gotten stuck in a dead end. How string theory, for instance, has failed to deliver on its promises after decades of promising the moon, literally, figuratively, and how backing out of this dead end and making real progress may require radical reinterpretations of the evidence that we have garnered about the universe from things like our study of the cosmic microwave background. And the other gentleman is a fellow named Roberto Mangabeira Unger, pardon me if I've mangled that name, and he's a philosopher who I was not familiar with at all until I picked up this book. I will say this book inspired me to pick up a number of other things by him, and I will be talking about them in due time because they are all really good reading. So the thesis of The Singular Universe and the Reality of Time is that it is not advancing a particular theory about the universe or about time, but rather it sets forward a series of suggestions on how to constrain and direct future theories about both of those things. And they can be broken down into a few basic categories. And the first one, which is right in the title, is that there is only one universe at a time, that we need to back away from the idea of multiverses. There may be more than one universe state, serially, death and rebirth, but the universe is to be treated as a singular phenomenon. There's only one of them, and that to think about it in any other way is difficult to support with evidence at best. The second big point that they bring up is that time should be considered the most fundamental of things. This means that everything is subject to change, including the concept of change itself. The laws that we're used to in the present state of the universe, the cooled down universe as they like to call it, this is not necessarily what existed before, when everything had a different state. Physical laws may have behaved differently because the state of everything was different. And one of the other corollaries of saying that time is a fundamental is the idea that space is emergent from time, that the future is an open-ended, indeterminate direction that we move in. It's basically an argument against what's been called the four-dimensional block universe, where everything exists in this kind of frozen state from beginning to end, and we could look outside the universe as if we were God and see all of the universe from beginning to end in terms of its time. And we could slice that up like a loaf of bread or what have you. They are rejecting this completely. They don't believe that these ideas are actually fruitful, that they lead us further away from good talk about what the universe is and why it is the way it is. And one other thing that they add to this is the idea that mathematics is a useful tool for analyzing physics and the universal laws, but they are not oracles. That is to say, mathematics does not contain within itself the pure, unadulterated truth of the universe, that if we just penetrate deeply enough into mathematics, we will have all of the universe's workings laid out for us there within it. It's a system by which we can understand how certain things operate, but the truth of things is not to be found in pure math alone. And this is actually an echo of a thesis that was put forward in another book which I read recently and enjoyed a great deal, by Sabine Hossenfelder. The book was called Lost in Math, How Beauty Leads Physics Astray. And there she criticized the idea that it is the beauty of physical theories that we should be reaching for. Now, the book is divided into two parts. The first part is Unger's part. It's about 60% of the book. And that's where he sets out what could be described as the philosophical case for what they are talking about, the point of view of a philosopher rather than a physicist. And Smolin's portion of the book, which is the remaining 40% or so, is the physicist's side of things. And one of the nice things I like about the book is that at the end, they take several pages to trade viewpoints and indicate where they also diverge as much as they do agree. And I thought that was a very nice way for them to nod towards their intellectual consistency and their willingness to try and find the truth together instead of just insisting on the truth as being something received wholesale. So how would a book like this be useful to a science fiction or fantasy writer? Well, the easy, obvious way to do it is you have a hard SF setting and you look at what the book's speculations are about what a future physics could consist of, and you construct a future physics in some general way that conforms to their recommendations. That's the easy way to do it, and that would be a great exercise for somebody to take up. Another way that you could treat this material, however, is if you have a story that involves the way some grand vision of things forms the basis for a total transformation of our worldview. That there's an argument being put forward in the story that touches everything that we see and everything that we know, and runs systematically contrary to every accepted view that we have of those things. But it's not so much to say that everybody is wrong as to say our vision of things is not complete. We need a larger view. We need a view that accommodates a much broader sense of what things could be like. And this whole book is a great example of how to do that, and also how to do that constructively and elegantly with beautifully argued language. So if you have a story about someone who is rethinking the world, the better to suggest radical new ideas about it, this book would serve as a great model for that. And a third way that you could think about this book as inspiration is there's a ton of interesting ideas introduced all along the way that by themselves, any one of them could be an interesting jumping off point and fuel for a whole story. One example of this is a corollary of a central point that they make, where they say that it is a mistake to use the way that we talk about any one part of the universe to talk about the universe as a whole. We need to treat the universe as a whole, individual, singular phenomenon, and not try to understand it by way of any of the physical theories that might be used to examine any of its parts. And this is why things like talk of the universe being inside a black hole, for instance, may just be too speculative to be useful. They actually tell us a whole lot less than we might think. They don't really give us anything we can work with. So thinking about the universe as its own singular case may actually empower us to think about it much more clearly than if we try to make analogies about it. So am I planning to make use of this book as an inspiration? And the short answer is yes. I won't say how, that would be telling. I will say that reading it is inspiring me to think very deeply about a future project, one I haven't talked about yet, and which would inform it from some unusual directions. But I think they're all going to be very constructive. I think they're all going to be quite powerful. And honestly, even though it's going to take a while for me to get there, I can't wait to see what people think about it. But for now, the book in question, once again, is The Singular Universe and the Reality of Time. It is available digitally and in print. And if anything I have said here about it sparks your interest, grab it and set aside at least 2 to 3 weeks to read it. You will need to take that time. Every sentence needs to be absorbed individually and thought about a great deal. It's heavy reading. And all the same, I'm wildly interested to see what you folks think too.